Good morning, everyone. I'm Axel Estebal. I am with the Natural History Museum of Utah. And we are so excited to talk about leading from a place of discomfort and what it feels like to sometimes be out of our depths, especially after a promotion or a new job, but also in plenty of other situations. I already see somebody nodding in understanding. So great. So, thank you for being here very early at 8:30. I would just like to introduce my co-panelists. So first we have Paul Martin, who is the co-director of the Center for Innovation in Informal STEM Learning at Arizona State University. We have Stephen Ashton, who is the senior director of the Butterfly Biosphere and the Curiosity Farms at Thanksgiving Point. Ryan, who is the CEO, Ryan Darensberg, who is the CEO of the Children's Museum of Houston, and Ken Wessler, who is the CEO of, I can never remember exact name, U- Universal Services Associates. Thank you. So, leading outside of our comfort zone, I'm sure that many of you have been there. Who is there now, like leading outside of your depth? I only see one. Okay, all right. More people are raising their hands. You wouldn't be here if everybody was completely okay with the position that they're in right now. So a couple of months ago, when Stephen and I were still colleagues, and we worked as at the same level in the same organization for several years. And full disclosure, I am now in a different position, and I have been in that position at the Natural History Museum of Utah for 87 days. So I have 3 more days to finish my 90-day plan. But Stephen and I were chatting one day, and I always thought that Stephen was completely cool as a cucumber and always very serene in meetings while I was going home every night and screaming in a pillow for 5 minutes. So we chatted, we had lunch together, and I told Stephen candidly, like, I don't know if I can do this. This sounded like such a good idea at the time. And Stephen said, I know, me too. And we're like, and so I thought, that there is something to learn with each other and from each other about being in a place of discomfort, how to grow, how to learn when a promotion or a new job that sounded like a really good idea at the time turns out to be a lot more than you thought. Um, so we first, so I know that most of you are in that place, but one thing I'd like to know is also where in your career you are. So we have a life survey that may or may not work. Oof. Okay. All right, here we go. So if you don't mind scanning this QR code and just letting us know where you are in your career, just what your experience level is. And then you can use the same QR code to ask questions and just type them in. You'll see an audience Q&A there, and so you can, and we'll see them. And rather than having people step up, we can just answer the questions that we see on the screen. Okay, lots of mid-career established. Um, okay, mid-career. I know it's a tough place to be when expectations are starting to build up, and um, and it feels very intimidating to need to meet those expectations. So we all have different pathways and all different positions. So we're going to have this conversation about where our pathways came and are going, and how we're responding to these expectations. So I'd like to start with Ryan. So sorry. So Ryan is the CEO of the Children's Museum and stepped into that position after the previous CEO had been there for 27 years, right? So can you tell us about that transition?
Um, I now can breathe easier now that I'm still counting in months. So now that it's been 36, 37 months, but at the front end, there were a lot of challenges. You have a leader that was there 27 years, a culture that solid, a very successful museum, large as well, looking at 1,000,000 visitors, a combination of guests and our outreach coming out of COVID, a shrunken, team. And also, my board had just adopted a new strategic plan, about 2 months before I arrived. So those were some of what, were some of the challenges. But, when I think about, looking back on it on reflection, like, what has made it so successful? First, I would say having the strategic plan turned out to be a real solid success because it gave a framework. It told me that the board was not, in conflict to our mission, or there was clear direction, which helped me have a platform to build on my staff and build relationships, because then I could use it as a means to say, "Hey, you guys, let's build this together. We have a road, but we don't, we get to define what the lanes look like, how fast they will go, how slow, how we prioritize." So it actually turned out to be a really strong foundation for, my listening sessions and engagement with the team.
And did you come from the museum field before?
No. On top of, I did not come from the museum field at all, and I was, a new CEO. I did not come from another organization, where I was the CEO, so I was, constantly dealing with a lot of self-doubt and, I literally, visceral reactions. My health, took a little bit of a nosedive at the beginning, and I had a lot of, anxiety and anxiousness, and it took me about a good 6 to 8 months to figure out that, 1, there was high trust in me, from the board and from the team, and that my lived experiences were valuable. I had to really figure that out in ways that, would lead me to be successful. I realized that I looked and had a background that was similar to our visitors, and that made a world of difference. So, our museum, about 35 to 40% are, a community that comes to the museum free of charge. And access is a huge part of what we do. And for me, the more I learned to embrace that, Rayanne, you're a first-time college student. You are an immigrant to this country. Your family, you've navigated some family struggles to get where you were, and I saw that as a strength. So that's not gonna be everyone's strength, but what I would say is that it's very important early on to know your strengths and to know how to make them work. And 2 tools I'll offer that I found to be very helpful was Strength Finders and VIA. I think the combination of those 2 and the tools that they give you to understand who you are, as a leader, and then be able to create some really strong strategies around that. It was helpful for me, and I would share that with all of you.
So you gave us some tips to work with the board, which can be very intimidating. How do you also engage with your team?
So for my team, I my approach was that, 1, I knew, and I would say all of you, if you're taking on a new role, you are entering into this with believing that you are in a successful organization, an organization that shines, and an organization that you're connected to their mission. Don't forget that, and that must mean that the team members there, have led the museum to success, so lean into that, lean into the things that have been so powerful, and resist the urge to be a change agent unless you were hired to be that change agent for an organization. Resist that urge and really spend some time in really solid listening and learning and building trust. And that looks differently for us, but again, I'd say leaning into your strengths to do that is important. But don't forget your board if you are in that role with your board. I have 40 board members and 60 advisory board members. That is a lot of relationships to manage, But what I found is if I when I got in there early and knowing their why matters. Not talking about the business side of what you're doing, but really understanding what motivates them, what keeps them engaged, who are friends in their circle that they would introduce you to. Use them as that advisory capacity, really engaging them early on in those conversations will help build, stronger relationships.
So at this point, you've been in this position for how long? 36
36
months? So
months.
3 years. What do you find to ground you or inspire you at the Children's Museum of Houston?
The things that ground me really strongly is our mission and our families. I think about myself as a child. I think of myself as a early learner, and the fact that we're just able to build curiosity in really powerful ways that others in the community just cannot. I think of schools. I think of all the other things that are happening in our Houston space, and the things that we do are so different and unique and complementary. They're not, I don't view others as competitors, but really complementary to what, the community needs and all, and that has really has given me strength, with our team.
And have you, in the last 36 months, have you set a new culture for your team and changed or reorient the workplace dynamics?
I have, and I don't say it because I think I have. I'm intentional about 360 reviews, so annually for my review, my board reviews me, but also my team members, those that are direct reports to me. So in itself was a cultural change to give me the feedback and also for me to receive it and for me to use that for my next year in terms of setting my objectives, my priorities. High self awareness and also high reflecting moments with my team. That's a cultural shift, but also it sets the expectations for my managing directors, that they are also to use that type of, uh, feedback with their teams as well.
And how have you brought your own personality and personality traits to change
Yeah.
that culture also?
Um, I I natu I love what I do, and I think that's important for everyone to have, that grounding, and that joy of experience, has to come from you as a leader for your team to have that as well. I'm not sure what's on the screen or not. I can't see, but, I was sharing with as we were putting this together, I was sharing with the team that one of the mantras that I have lived by and I keep in front of me is, Khalil Gibran. There was a quote early on that I wrote that work is love made visible. Um, and I think it's important, and for me, it's been about treating your work as a tangible expression, just not a means to an end, and emphasizing the importance of finding meaning and satisfaction with your team as well. Um, y as much I would say that we all are very focused on visitor experience and that engagement for those that we serve, but what does that look like for us to be of service to each other as team members? Like, how do you live that in a way that you know it will then roll down to how you serve your community has been, something that I have found very impactful.
Work is love made visible. I think that it's a wonderful mantra to have. Thank you. Anything you'd like to add? Any last lesson for that you'd like to share?
I'm still navigating discomfort. It's real. I think some things that have challenged, and continue is, um, when you're in rapid growth, for example, we're in capital campaign, but it's silent, but you can't be silent. How do you navigating those things are really odd in the community. Um, I'd also say navigating anticipation, like when your community desires you to do more and so forth. Like, how do you hold back without showing everything because you don't want people to burn out early, especially if you're in long phases, 5 to 10 years of growth. You don't want to tell everyone everything early on because you don't know it either. So how do you like just kind of dial it up where people are, they wanna know more, but you can't give more at the same time. So, you'll always navigate discomfort. It'll just look differently at different times.
Great. Thank you.
All right, Axel. Are you ready for this?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so I had the great privilege of working with Axel for how many years were you at Thanksgiving Point?
6.5 years.
So 6.5 years, and then just recently he went to the Natural History Museum of Utah. We miss him deeply. He's been so wonderful at Thanksgiving Point. I'd love for you to share with all of us, Axel, what's been your pathway and how did you get to your position that you're in now?
So it's been a gradual climb, and every time that I had a new position, from supervisor to manager to director, and now to another director, but in a different branch, because I was in education and facilitation for most of my 14-year career, and now I'm in operations. And so there's a lot to learn. It's a very steep learning curve. But I love a challenge and I love learning. I consider that if you're not learning, then you're really doing something wrong. You should really stay curious all the time and challenge yourself. So every time it's been intimidating. Sometimes I've had moments like I was sharing earlier where I thought, what have I done? It sounded like such a good idea at the time, and now I don't know how to handle this. But this is how you grow. It's always outside of your comfort zone that you grow.
Awesome. And now that you're in this new position, can you tell us a little bit about some of the tools that you're now using?
So yeah, like I said, I'm still at the end of my first 3 months in this new position. So it's it's something that I have to learn, where I have a lot to learn. I am in charge now of facilities. I was in charge before of an interpretation education team, and now I have to learn how to read architectural blueprints and talk with construction crews or contractors, and know about different kinds of light fixtures, etc. So I'm consider myself very much in a learning phase right now, and um, sometimes, and I don't want to call him my boss, but the person to whom I report is here in the room, so I hope that he won't think less of me for saying that. But I recognize that there's a whole lot that I don't know about this new position, but that there was a reason why I was hired, and because I I may not have all the information, but I have some of the expertise and experience that is required to be in that position. I have skills like critical thinking and systems thinking, etc. And so gathering information about this specific position is, I wouldn't say ancillary, but it's secondary to all that experience. And so, like Ryan was saying, just know your strengths and lean into them. Understand why it was that you were hired. The team who hired me knew perfectly well that I didn't have experience with facilities and with construction, but saw something that I could bring to the table. So understanding that, leaning into it, really helps keeping a clear head, and then being in a information gathering mode for a really long time.
Yes. So you spoke about not knowing all the answers, and you've talked about being willing to learn and having this learning mindset. How do you embrace that learning mindset while building a mutual trust with your team when you don't have all the answers?
Yeah, a lot of times I knew that I didn't have all the answers, and I realized that sometimes I didn't even know what the questions were going to be. And so it's remaining just super curious all the time. What I started by doing is, before I even interviewed, I collected all the information that I could on the website, on any publicly available information, like the strategic plan, like any document that I could find. Studied that, did my homework, and I came to the interview with a very long list of questions that I then didn't have time to ask, but I already knew what it was that I wanted to know. So I already presented that curiosity mindset. I continued having a lot of questions, and what I continue to do, I mean, I hope that I'll always have questions and I'll always continue to learn. But what I continue to do right now, as I'm in this intensive information gathering phase, is that I take frantic notes all the time in every meeting, every conversation, every Zoom call. I take notes. Sometimes I ask if I can record the conversation and then I review them. So I take notes on loose paper and I reserve some time at the end of the day to transcribe those notes and complete them in a notebook that looks a little bit better and doesn't like fly all over the place. And that gives me a chance to reprocess those notes, add some thoughts, add some questions. And I found that this is a very important time for me to kind of reprocess, let the dust settle, and think about it. So I make it a point every night to take 20, 30 minutes, and then at the end of every week, block a time on Friday afternoon, usually from 3 to 4, to go back over the week and go over those notes and reprocess and think about new questions.
I'm a little envious. I feel like I sometimes don't have that amount of time to reflect, but I love that you're able to do that. I'd love to learn a little bit more about, and you and I have had discussions about this, about like conventional employment frameworks and hierarchies, the way that we report or the way that things are structured. Tell me a little bit about that with your role now.
So I really don't like being called a boss because I don't want to boss anyone around. I consider that my primary responsibility is supporting the team so that they can do what they're best at. And so I don't like delegating, but I like empowering. And I realize that in the first 90 days, 6 months, whatever, you need information, but also you need relationships. And so that relationship building, you know how sometimes at the end of the day you feel like I was running around, I was so busy all day, but I can't tell you what I've done. And what you've done a lot of times is build relationships because you've been talking with people, you've been solving problems, you've been finding some like quick wins. For example, I had one person who sent in a work request because the light over her desk kept flickering and going out, and so her desk is like 30 feet away from mine. So rather than escalating the work request, etc., I just grabbed the light from my desk and I walked it over, and she was like, "Holy crap! Like it's been 3 minutes and my problem is already solved." And then I spent a couple of minutes talking with her, learning about what she does, asking her what she's most excited about, and now we have a good relationship. And that's so important. And it's also important with the team. And I think that, like I said, empowering rather than delegating, and while supporting, it gives the team the confidence that they know what they're doing. And when you show them that confidence, when you show them that trust, then they can also trust you. And they'll want to exercise that expertise to contribute to the team, not just to their job. And so I think that having a distributed leadership model where you're supporting the team, you're not telling them what to do, but you're supporting them, you're telling them, you're the expert, I need to learn from you. How can I support you? But tell me what it is that you're doing so that I understand better. It creates a more solid foundation than somebody coming in and thinking that they have all the answers.
I totally agree with you. I think building those relationships of trust is extremely important. So, anything else that you'd like to share?
So I think that, as we established, many people experience some discomfort when they step into a new position, and I think, I mean, it's absolutely normal. It's if you don't, I think that you're doing something wrong. But the way that I see it is that discomfort isn't failure; that it's feedback, and that it tells you that you're growing. It tells you that you're learning. It tells you that you're challenging yourself, and it's almost important to cultivate it so that you're always you never become complacent, but you always continue to challenge yourself and find new ways to support your team, find new ways to support your organization. So discomfort isn't failure, it's feedback.
Thank you, Axel.
Well, Stephen, we're passing the baton, as you can tell. This is a highly choreographed. We were going to do it in the aisle with dance steps, but we're just going to sit here.
So watch out.
Yeah, watch out. They still could. The finale is really going to be something. So, Stephen, what's your role right now, and how does it differ from what you used to do?
Yeah, so I'm at Thanksgiving Point, and I should just give a quick description of what Thanksgiving Point is for those that don't know. We are in Utah. We're about 30 miles south of Salt Lake City. And Thanksgiving Point is a multi-museum farm and garden complex. We have 5 different museum discovery center experiences. And I've been at Thanksgiving Point for about 16 years. And so I've had a chance to see things grow a lot at Thanksgiving Point, and I feel like I've been doing a lot of growing as well. And part of that happened about a little over 2 years ago. So my first role at Thanksgiving Point, I was on the exhibits team. I worked part-time. I was there for about a year and a half, and then I was hired full-time to head up the audience research and evaluation team. And at that time, it was a team of 1, just me. And then over time, I had another person kind of join our team, and it was just the 2 of us. And sometimes we'd have interns or other volunteers helping us out, but it was really just the 2 of us for about 10 years. And to tell you the truth, I felt really comfortable with what I was doing. I felt like I had progressed a lot, and I felt like I was making meaningful contributions. At the same time, I also felt like, do I want to be doing this all the time? And that was kind of percolating in the back of my mind when the CEO reached out to me and said, "Hey, Stephen, we're thinking about making some of these changes. How do you feel about becoming the senior director for the butterfly biosphere and for Curiosity Farms," which at that time was under construction? And I said, "That sounds really exciting. Let me think about it for a little bit." So I remember chatting with my wife and thinking, this sounds like a really awesome opportunity. It's going to bring a lot of change, and it's going to bring a lot of discomfort. Uh, I've thought back, I'm really comfortable with where I am, but I think all of us, as we want to grow in our professional lives and even in our personal lives, I think it's inevitable that we need to embrace change. And so I said yes. I took the role, and now I've been in this role for about 2.5 years, and I feel like I've been growing and stretching in more ways than I thought that I could.
So, do you find it at times overwhelming?
Yeah. Who else has ever felt overwhelmed with their work? Yes, I'm in pleasant company then. Uh, so it has definitely felt overwhelming, and I remember going from a team of 2 where the person I worked with, she is remarkable and just never needed any kind of management or any kind of correction. I felt like I was trying to keep up with her with the great work that she was doing. And then it switched over to where I now had many people reporting to me, and the teams under them made up about somewhere between 80 and 100 people. And all of a sudden, I'm responsible for all of the things that are happening in these different areas. And so, yeah, I did feel overwhelmed and felt like, am I am I qualified for this? Am I good enough for this? And there were times where I thought, I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm going to press forward the best that I can and try to, and Axel talked a lot about this, try to build the relationships. To me, I felt like that building the relationship is more important than getting stuff done or feeling like you have to do everything. And so to me, it's been an exercise in understanding, okay, when I'm feeling overwhelmed, what are the most important things that I ought to be focusing on? And for me, it's trying to strengthen those relationships and help those team members that I work with to feel like I'm listening to them and I'm wanting them to feel supported.
So you have kind of a unique position at Thanksgiving Point, and I didn't know this, but your parents were the founders,
Yes,
or are the founders, and
they are.
you're
Yes.
still active, right?
Yeah.
Wow, how'd
So
that work?
yeah, so that's been an interesting thing. So my parents, My dad is Alan Ashton. My mom is Karen Ashton. My dad was the co-founder and inventor of WordPerfect. How many of you remember WordPerfect back in the day? Yeah. So if you're old enough, you know what WordPerfect is. If you're young enough, it's like think of it as the predecessor to Word. And my
But more perfect.
but more perfect, absolutely. My father had been really successful with that, and he and my mom just felt so blessed for everything that they had received. They wanted to give thanks back to the community and back to God, and that's why they established Thanksgiving Point. It's this idea of giving thanks back. And so I recognize this legacy of my parents wanting to have this really remarkable gathering place that now has over 2 million people a year that come to
Wow.
visit Thanksgiving Point. And so um, I've always thought I don't ever want to just be hired or be given a promotion just because I'm an Ashton. And so I've thought about that a lot and thought I want to make sure that I'm qualified. So that's part of the reason I wanted to get advanced degrees, so that if I did continue my work there, that it's something where I would never want someone to say, "Well, the reason that Steven's there is he's just, he's part of the family." And I hope I've tried to
I
show
didn't
that.
have a clue.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's good.
Yeah.
Um, I wanted it to be something where I could demonstrate that I was qualified, and it wasn't just the name, but that it was something that I wanted to show that I truly cared about people, that I was willing to work hard, that I was willing to make sacrifices for the team and for the job. And I don't know how well I'm doing with that, but I'm trying.
Anybody who works for Steven here? How's he doing? Sorry, man. So
Good.
you and Axel had a conversation about email bankruptcy, and that's a new term to me.
Yeah. So
Talk about.
I learned about it somewhere, and I thought there got to a point, especially with this new role, I just kept getting emails and emails and emails where it's like thousands of emails start piling up that are unread. And I heard someone talk about email bankruptcy where they determined I'm just going to like mark everything as read and I'm just going to move forward from there. And I know it sounds absolutely outrageous and almost like like you're throwing it all into the wind. And I there was one point I just like, I've got to do it. I felt so bogged down by everything that I just said, I'm going to declare bankruptcy. With my emails, I marked everything as read, and then I kept moving on. And I've realized things worked out okay. Nothing burned down. I did have a few people say, "Hey, Stephen, remember I sent I sent this. Oh, yes, let me take a look into that." So there are definitely moments like that, but I had to realize that as there were so many different pressures and so many things that were happening, I had to allow myself to move on and to not feel like I had to do everything. I just feel like if I did everything that I was supposed to be doing, I wouldn't have enough time for anything. And for me, my family life is really important. My wife and I have a bunch of kids, and we really want to support. We have 8 children. We have 7 boys and 1 girl, so it's a crazy household, and it's so fun. But I really value spending time with them, and so I had to realize I'm trying to find this right balance of being a leader on my team and supporting my team while also being a leader at home and showing my family that I love and support them. And there's always this continual balancing act that we're doing. And so sometimes things have to be let go. And that's why I did the email bankruptcy. I'm trying to do better. And something I'm always working on.
And what advice would you have for folks coming into new roles as leaders,
Yeah. So
as you have?
yeah, if you're new, I say embrace the feeling of being overwhelmed. It's okay to feel overwhelmed. It's okay to feel stretched, and it's okay to not know everything. To me, when I first started in this new role, I decided I want to be someone that that cares about his team, and I want my team members to know that I'm there to listen to them. And I just really appreciate what Axel had said about building those relationships. And that's something that's been really paramount for me, where sometimes I get down the end of the day and I think, what did I do? Well, I did meet with this person. I helped them with this challenge that they had. I met with this person, helped them with this thing, or I was able to step out of my time in my office and help with this situation. And so to me, I'm trying to do more to measure my success not in the things that I get done, but in the relationships that I'm able to build and help and support.
Awesome. Thank you, Stephen.
Yeah, you bet.
Thank you so much. Paul,
Yes.
let us talk about imposter syndrome.
My God.
So let's start with what is it?
Well, I knew the term, but I didn't quite know what it was all about. And those two words together to me are like really conjure up really powerful things, like some incurable disease, which it's not, or something that uh, is used in the espionage business, which would be really helpful. Um, and I guess I need to say that, and I said to these guys when we were planning the session, I have this enormous comfort zone. I've never felt I've probably have been an imposter many times, but I've never like felt this syndrome thing about it. And I've talked to people about it, and it's real, and it's about feeling um out of your depth, and am I really, should I really be here? And the one of the ways of dealing with that, I think, is to just talk to folks. And it is about relationships. That's the recurring thing.
Hmm.
I think in all of our careers and all of the work we've done is it's the relationships that we have with our colleagues and the relationships that we now have with each other that we didn't have a month ago. And and the relationships that we have with people we work with, people we work for. Um, I've I've had the really great opportunity in my career to be a senior manager of hundreds of people and all that kind of stuff, but also to be out of my comfort zone in working with communities and folks that I'm not part of their community, but have been charged in my projects to work in those communities and understand those communities and help to create value for them on their terms, not on my terms. So stepping out of being a professional, and the other theme that came up here was humility, and really being comfortable with that, being comfortable with not being the expert. And listening is a really incredible tool that we've all said. So I just don't want to linger on imposter syndrome because it's like something that it's making more of something than you need to get to the essence of what those two terms mean in this context and deal with that.
All right, so let's come at it from a slightly different angle.
Yeah.
What is not imposter syndrome?
Um, I think what's not imposter syndrome is being able to understand new situations, deal with new situations, ask for help in new situations. It's like, how many of you guys deal with funders? Okay. One of the great things that I've learned in dealing with funders is you don't ask them to help you. You figure out how you can help them. And that's a really big deal is understanding that you're there to help. And in that you build relationships that reciprocate and really create value for everybody. And I think that's kind of the opposite of imposter syndrome. It's like just being who you are.
So you sound like a really centered kind of person. Um, so I have to ask, what knocks you sideways? What knocks you off your center?
Well, the current political system is kind of rocking everybody's center, or mine anyway. And that, uh, how many, did any of you know Elaine Gurian? Have you ever heard of Elaine? So Elaine, uh, at an AAM talk probably 20 years ago, said, this is really all about love. It's love of each other. It's love of relationships. It's love of our community. It's love for how we can make a difference in the world. And what knocks me off is when it becomes about fear and hate and divisiveness. Because that's really, and I've been working, as I said, I've been working with a lot of community groups. And they're like in the thick of all of this from immigration issues and all stuff to other things. But what I've learned from them is they say, how we're going to deal with this, is we're just going to keep going. We're going to keep doing the work. We're going to keep engaging our communities. We're going to keep advancing our communities in the midst of chaos and not knowing where things are going to go.
A recurring theme here has been fear,
Yeah.
right? Different words, anxiety, whatever. So you just mentioned fear. Um, do you feel fear? And if so, how do you get on top of it?
Nah, I'm kind of fearless. I mean, it's there's no it. I felt fear, and we all feel fear if we're physically threatened and things like that. But in the environment that I've worked in, you know, maybe early on I felt some fear, but it didn't get me anywhere. And so you have to be pretty fearless. It's just it for me, and it's a personal thing. For me, it's just not a very helpful tool.
You seem to have a real perspective on these things. Is this something that came to you over the length of your career? Or do you think nature or nurture is really the question?
Well, I used to be the youngest guy in the crowd, and I had terrific mentors. I've been in this game 50 years and had some really terrific mentors over the course of that. And one of my mentors, a woman by the name of Barbara Franco, who I worked with at the Minnesota Historical Society, she was fantastic. She had a management style, which was she'd climb way out on a branch, as metaphorically. She'd climb way out on a branch and she'd jump up and down really hard. And she'd say, "Come on out. It's not going to break. And if it does, I don't know." And it was fantastic that she was so fearless in that really worked as a model. So it is, I think it is nurture. I think it's I've learned from so many people, um, and that I keep going back to Elaine's thing of it's about love.
I'm really curious. Could you people raise your hand if you have a mentor? Yeah, a significant number, and this is a great place to find someone,
Yeah.
right? So, what are your closing thoughts about fear and imposter syndrome and getting through that?
Okay. So uh, I used to work at the Field Museum a long time ago. One of the first jobs that I had, which was kind of a big job, and I was the design supervisor there under Michael Spock when there was a lot of change happening back in the 80s. And I had a colleague who was a designer who talked about the rumored Field Museum uh, employee assistance program. And if you're having trouble with your job, and particularly if you're in a new position, you'd go to they'd send you to this psychologist in downtown Chicago, and they'd listen to you for about half an hour. And everybody who went there came back with the same story. After about half an hour of listening and nodding, they'd say, "That's very interesting. Buck up, quit whining, and get back to work." And that's been a guiding principle for me, and it works.
We only have a minute left, but a quick thought about this. I noticed that one of the bulletin boards out there talks about uh, the many generations that are operating within our organizations right now and bringing alignment. And what you just said to me is a very boomer kind of that old fashioned,
Well, of
I'm
course it is.
talking, look at me, I mean, uh, so how do you reconcile that kind of buck up, shut up, and get back to work with the very real, logical, positive sort of changing perspectives that we have now?
Um, I don't know. I'm going to retire someday, and it's going to be, that's out in front of me closer than what was behind me. So I mean, I have relationships with the young people. I work at a university, so I'm surrounded by young people all the time, and it's projecting hope. It's projecting um, that we can make a difference, and that we have to be humble in making a difference, because often you're not being trained to be experts. You're being trained. Like, there's a book that, I love the title of, which is called "Humility is the New Smart." And that's really, fostered by 2 women physicians in the Bay Area that found that they as experts and the sort of physician mindset, they weren't doing very well with immigrant communities. And when they started to listen to the immigrant communities, and 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 Rand and I had a conversation about the Hmong community in the Twin Cities in St. Paul, and it's really about understanding different cultures and different ways of thinking to be effective. And so being humble and listening and acting. So it's not a passive thing, it's a very active thing.
Thank you.
So we've been getting lots of great questions, and we'll, after I interview Ken, we're going to address some of them. So Ken, there's this, you think about ambition, and then you think about current reality, and I think that you can offer some ideas and thoughts around that to our audience. So, speaking of challenges, how do you deal with challenges? What are some tools and some things that you have uh, used to help you?
The first thing is one of my pet peeves is the phrase, I have multiple priorities. Um, Priority, the word means prior, right? Prior to anything else. At any given time, I only have one priority. And they may shift and they may shift at lightning speed, but at any moment, only one thing. And so that's what I focus on. What is my priority right now? And I do a thing, I call it the rule of threes. How will my decision affect things in 3 minutes, 3 hours, 3 days, 3 weeks, 3 months, and 3 years? And I try to evaluate every decision I make within that context. So I'm cognizant of its tactical impact and also its strategic impact.
So, I like that. Multiple priorities. That makes complete sense, and I love that tool. Um, I can imagine though that in your in day-to-day work and being the leader that you are, um, you've had to deal with some failures along the way. Um, how have you dealt with those failures? How have they kept made you you and kept you going as well?
Let's talk about the guitar because it was an early failure. Let's put the guitar up. By the way, I think if you're not failing, you're not doing enough stuff. I mean, really simply, failure is a quantification of effort beyond the norm, and I need to fail, or I just don't feel like I'm moving the needle at all. All right, so what's on the screen here is a guitar that I built when I was a production student at Temple University in theater. And the charge was we had the whole school year to build what they called the toy project. And other students made puppets and things like that. And I thought, okay, I'm going to be really ambitious. I'm going to build a guitar. Really ambitious, especially since I'm a drummer. Okay, maybe stupid, but I felt ambitious. So I built a guitar. I built it out of white oak. It was gorgeous, lots of beautiful scroll work, and played very, very badly. So I threw it in the trash and I started again and I built this guitar. And because I was so late, I only got half of the finishing coats on it. Can't really see in the slide, but it's not that glossy, shiny kind of electric guitar thing that you expect, right? And I got a B. And my schoolmates were shocked that this, there's a marionette that gets an A, and here's this functioning electric guitar that gets a B. And it was very clear to me that it deserved a B at best, actually. And so when my first role in the C-suite was in 1989. I became managing director of Walnut Street Theater, and I hung that guitar on my wall, and I would tell everybody that this was my B guitar. And it always had this reaction. How could they have given you a B? And I said, well, it's easy. It doesn't matter how ambitious you are. It's the excellence with which you execute. So keeping your ambitions within a manageable kind of project so you can succeed with excellence. You strive for perfection and settle for excellence. You probably have heard that. That's what's key. Strive. Oh, is that new? I know I'm a font of useless sayings. So, by the way, I hung it on my wall, and I was then a CEO of a performing arts center, and I was promoting BB King, and one of my operations folks said you should have BB sign your B guitar, and because that's what we all called it, and so he did. And then the next week, Glenn Campbell was there, and he said, "Oh, let me sign it," and that's why it says "and Glenn Campbell." And that just started a thing with all these artists signing this guitar. And the thing that makes it so fascinating to me is how this guitar has now become um, sort of an embodiment of that idea and still on my wall.
So I hear another tip, like keep mementos and memories around you that keep you grounded as well. Those things that you can what a great story. Things that make you you. So you know, s that's a great example of how you've dealt with what was a perceived failure. How do you deal with success? What does that look like for you?
I'm not, I don't like the word success. Who defines success? Right? This has been the challenge I've always had. When I was running performing arts centers, we'd have a budget surplus and 200,000 people came in the doors. Go us, right? And somebody would say it was successful. And I'd think, really? I mean, what if we could have had 400,000 people through the door? What if we could have had triple the surplus or triple the programs, right? I always view surplus as a program that wasn't done. And I'm not saying we shouldn't have responsible surpluses for financial health, so on and so forth. But so I don't like the word success. I've never thought of anything as successful. I've never thought of myself as successful because I just don't know what the yardstick is. And I think I'm more comfortable in the realm of saying goals. I set certain goals. Did I achieve those goals? Although even then, there's a voice at the back of my head saying, "Were you aggressive enough with your goals?" I was after I retired as a performing arts center CEO, I became a fundraiser, and I used to say to my team, if we don't hit the goal at 11:59 p.m. of the last day of the fiscal year, the goal was too low, right? We don't celebrate it when we hit it a month before. Again, we just took resources away from programming folk because our goal was too low. So, I get the heebie-jeebies at the word success.
Yeah, that felt familiar with development there for a second. Um, so, could you talk a little bit about the 3 toxicities that you, think about when you think about leadership and us leading?
Yeah, I have 2 plaques on my wall. One says, "No blame, no credit, no fear." And I think of those as the 3 toxicities: blame, credit, and fear. It's what creates politics. It impedes productivity. It hurts people's feelings. You have to operate with the idea that you're not looking to blame anyone for anything that goes wrong. And I think where we can go sideways is in our effort to discover what there is to learn so we don't repeat a mistake. We get a little overenthusiastic, I feel, about who did it. And I think we're well served when we excise that idea and focus on what went wrong and what allowed the thing to go wrong, what supports were missing. All right, so John is responsible. Why? What did he not have? What did he have too much of? Who was he not talking to? Right? I mean, if you're managing people, you are responsible for their success. So I don't like blame. Credit is the opposite side of exactly the same thing. If you don't have blame, it's very hard to have credit. Now, mind you, I give a lot of credit to folks in the organization, but I'm very quick to try to step on, and I use those words really uh, uh, intentionally, any attempt for anyone to take credit. So if you said to me, "I did an amazing job, this was all me," I'm gonna say, "Well, look, remember someone, blah, blah, blah. But if you don't say that, I'm going to be saying to you, you did an amazing job and you deserve a lot of credit for getting this done. It sounds weird, but that's kind of how I feel. Um, Fear, when I think about every single bad decision I've ever made as a human being in my life, every single one of them can be distilled down to fear without exception. Fear of failure, fear of success, fear of commitment, fear of expansion, fear of contraction, whatever. And so I don't live with fear. I love discomfort. I pursue it. When I've gotten comfortable in a position, I leave. And I became an extreme diver to pursue that.
That's
So
great. So, to make sure that we've been capturing a lot of thoughts, Axel is gonna share some of those and there's some standout questions that we think may be helpful.
And I want to thank all of you who have contributed to this little thought process of the thought exercise of how you cope with discomfort. So, one of the questions is, will those be shared with the audience? I'm going to compile them. At the end, you'll have a QR code where we have some of our tactics and tools that we've been talking about, and I'll just add those to the end of it. But give me like at least a half hour before I do that. I have this one question that was just asked, which is, how did you know when it was time to change roles? How do you know when you're ready for the next step, when the position you leave will be okay without you? And you just mentioned that, Ken, like when you're w- w-
when I'm no longer uncomfortable.
no, yeah, exactly.
Um, it, it's I can't explain it. It's one of those I know it when it happens. And it's not complacency. I think it would become complacency, and I think that's what I'm so afraid of. Um, it's just when things are becoming routine, when the machine is moving, and I feel like there is the systems and processes and people are just flowing beautifully. I start to think, what am I doing here?
And I also have a very quick answer to that. That's from the movie Blown Away with Lloyd Bridges and Jeff Bridges. And Lloyd Bridges said, then I knew that it was time to leave my role when I started wondering if it was time to leave my role. We have lots of great questions. I'm so sorry that we only have a few minutes left. There's one that I think is really important is, how do you navigate imposter syndrome when starting a new role after leaving a toxic workplace? But also about imposter syndrome. Oh, wait, oh, it got upvoted. This I'd be interested to hear from the other panelists about their thoughts on navigating imposter syndrome. This is especially real for women in the
It
workplace.
is. I think it's very real. Um, especially if you're in a role, well, regardless. I think for me, I have not had a few dynamics. I've not had a female board president in 30 years at the Children's Museum. It is, I I have fantastic board presidents and so forth, but we just have not. Secondly is, um, I felt like an imposter going to the homes of my board members and donors because I didn't have that lived experience. And I really felt as though initially that's what they desired. Like, I can't tell you about my summer trips in Italy when I was growing up. I can't tell you about, you know, the things that, that may have been conversations that made me feel, especially in group settings of that, but, so I think it's very real, but I think the turning point for me or those in leadership positions is when you're able to grab the nuggets and see how unique your lived experience is valuable and you also have stories. And capturing those stories and those moments in meaningful ways could help your donors and your board members connect to your mission and using that connector point because they have a why, but it's not necessarily as deep as the mission and why you chose your role. So being able to grab that, I think, allows you to let go of some of that imposter feeling that you're having. No one else is knowing this necessarily. It's what you're experiencing inside and allows you to grab this thread that you're able to pull in very strong ways. I don't Did you have feelings, Steve?
I still have feelings of imposter syndrome sometimes where even though I talked about trying to be qualified, I still feel like, am I really qualified? Am I, I can think about this other person. They're much better at this, and this, and I lack those things. Um, and when that happens, I just have to remind myself, I'm guessing others feel the same way. And even if they don't, it's okay to feel that way and it's okay to keep moving forward.
I'm sorry to say we have many other great questions. We are running out of time. It's just 9:30. So, but I would love for those of you who asked them, I would love to have you come up and we have this conversation directly. I want to thank all of you for being here, for coming at 8:30 in the morning, for participating in this session and participating to this thought experiment. The QR code that's up there, I'm going to update the file that's on it with all of your thoughts. So if you want to bookmark that and revisit it in about an hour, I'll just copy and paste everything that you said. And I really want to thank you again for being here and for participating.